What's going on, YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at the Nashville Predators, as it seems like David Poile and the Nashville Predators are going in a new direction, and it may involve them being sellers at the 2021 NHL Trade Deadline, and they have a couple of assets that may draw some interest. We'll be taking a look at that in this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, you want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and even bigger subscribe down below. And let's take a look at the Nashville Predators. So, mock trades for the Nashville Predators. Where do we start? There is a lot of talent on this team, and when it was known that they were going to likely be sellers at the trade deadline this year, a lot of questions have been raised about who exactly are the Predators potentially going to move out at the trade deadline. Now, the three untouchable names that we've heard, which makes this a little bit less fun, but let's be honest, these are the keystone pieces of this Preds team, and those are Captain Roman Josi, defenseman Ryan Ellis, and goaltender Pekka Rinne. Now, Pekka Rinne has a no-move clause. I think Ryan Ellis as well, and Roman Josi, I think, has a no-move. And he's also the captain of the team. So those three factors, more than likely, it's no move clause. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the guys that will likely be available here at the deadline for the Preds. Now, one of the names we've been hearing a lot about is left winger Filip Forsberg. He's making $6 million for this season and next year. So at next year's trade deadline, wherever he ends up going, he will be at that point a pending unrestricted free agent next summer. Not next summer. Wait, is it next summer? Yeah, next summer, summer of 2022, Filip Forsberg will be a free agent. But I think there's going to be plenty of teams interested in this young forward. Filip Forsberg, I think he's still 28, 29, so he's still fairly young. He's in his prime of his NHL career. And $6 million for the next 2 years for some of these cap-constrained teams looking for some offense up front in their top six, he would fit in quite nicely. The first trade I'm going to take a look at, we're heading to Anaheim as the Anaheim Ducks trade Cam Fowler, a first and a third for Filip Forsberg. You may be saying, what? You're trading that many assets for Filip Forsberg? Well, the problem is Cam Fowler's contract is becoming an issue. He isn't the best, so the Ducks are likely going to have to retain a little bit on the salary of Cam Fowler. And with all the defensemen that we're going to see the Predators moving, you're going to get a guy in Cam Fowler that can play on the blue line. Not necessarily as good as some of the other guys that the Predators have, but they're also picking up those draft picks. And I think that's something that the Nashville Predators will be interested in as they kind of look to do a mini rebuild or a retool of this team. So I think the Anaheim Ducks, like I said, Cam Fowler, a first or 2 seconds, and a third-round pick. I think the Ducks have to be careful with their first-round picks. As we know, the Ducks have been at the bottom of the standings for the last couple of seasons, so maybe it's 2 second-round picks and a third, which prevents the whole lottery issue for the Anaheim Ducks with their first-rounders. But do the Ducks really find themselves in a position where they want to trade first-rounders? That's another question you have to remember. Or second-rounders, right now. So, again, this is one of those trades. I just wanted to throw it out there because the Ducks have been in talks for trying to acquire more forwards. This seems like a guy that could fit in nicely. He's a good veteran player for some of these young guys like Trevor Zegras, Maxime Comtois, Sam Steele, Isaac Lundestrom. He'd be a nice key addition to this team, but the price tag for a guy like Filip Forsberg is just a little bit too high. Moving on to the New York Islanders, as the Islanders are another team that I think is going to be in on Filip Forsberg, but the problem is the price. What is the price on Filip Forsberg? Because the problem is the Islanders have young guys like Oliver Wahlstrom, Kiefer Bellows, Michael Dal Cole, Noah Dobson. So which one of those combinations of guys would the Nashville Predators want for Filip Forsberg? I think it would honestly have to take a guy like Oliver Wahlstrom and a 2022 second-round pick. Oliver Wahlstrom has picked up 6 points in the last 5 games for the Islanders. He's on a 5-game point streak for the Isles. So he's a young, up-and-coming forward. He's still on his entry-level contract, which saves the Predators some money. And they also pick up a second-round pick. Now, the problem with this trade from the Islanders' perspective is you're taking $6 million for a guy that you don't know in 2 years from now if you really want to, next offseason, if they're going to be able to keep with guys like Pollock and and Pelech having to be re-signed, Ilya Sorokin. The Islanders have a lot of guys that they have to re-sign, so do you want to add another contract compared to what Oliver Wahlstrom in his entry-level deal, plus a second-round pick, just to acquire a guy that's a proven commodity? Are the Islanders willing to do that? That's up for debate. Or do the Islanders trade a guy like Noah Dobson straight up for Filip Forsberg? I don't know if that's really something Islander fans would be too overly happy about. So it's going to be a tough trade for the Islanders because, like I said, there's a big gap right now between a guy like Wahlstrom and Dobson compared to, say, a Kiefer Bellows or an Otto Koivula or a Michael Dal Cole, who they seem like lesser assets at this point. So the Islanders, again, I think they're going to be in on Filip Forsberg, but the problem is it a first-round pick, second-round pick? What is the price tag that the Islanders are willing to give up to the Nashville Predators? The third team that I think is honestly the strongest contender for Filip Forsberg right now is the Carolina Hurricanes. The Carolina Hurricanes have been in on the Patrick Laine trade talks, and I think they are still looking for that forward. And this would come in at a cheaper cost, Filip Forsberg, in terms of overall salary per season, as well as the cost in terms of prospects and picks. Now, we do know that they have a plethora of defensemen in Carolina, so the Carolina Hurricanes would have to give up right shot defenseman Brett Pesce. He could play in the top four, a better 3, 4, maybe even 5 defensemen on a really good team. Brett Pesce's a good D-man, and I think the Nashville Predators, if they kind of retool, a guy like Brett Pesce could absolutely stabilize the blue line alongside guys like Ellis and Josi. Brett Pesce would be a solid third option, a great skater. He's had some issues with injuries, but again, with that Carolina blue line as deep as it is, it kind of makes a guy like Brett Pesce expendable, and maybe makes it easier for them to sign a guy like Dougie Hamilton if they want to keep him, because now they realize they have to keep him now with a guy like Brett Pesce out of the lineup. And I'm also going to say you're probably going to have to throw in a first-round pick, especially if Carolina, with where they are in the standings, that's a mid to late first-round pick from the Hurricanes, so you're giving up a mid to late round first-round pick as well as Brett Pesce. I think that's a fairly good trade for Filip Forsberg. All right, so now we're moving on to Victor Arvidsson. A little bit of a different situation. He's more of a, Filip Forsberg is a bona fide first line or maybe second line winger. Victor Arvidsson can play anywhere from the third line to the first line on any given night. And that flexibility makes him a little bit more of a commodity for some other teams. And he's obviously been drawing interest from more teams. And one of those teams is the Vancouver Canucks and the New Jersey Devils, who I think will be in on Arvidsson. Now, also remember the cap hit. That is a big thing here for Victor Arvidsson. So he signed for the next 4 years at $4.25 million per season. That's a fairly good contract. I think Victor Arvidsson can draw interest on the trade market, especially with the length of that contract. I think the Nashville Predators can maybe pry away another extra second or third round pick, or maybe a B-level prospect because of the longevity of this contract at the great cap hit that it is. The two teams, like I said, Vancouver and New Jersey. The Vancouver Canucks would have to give up forward Adam Gaudette, Jake Virtanen, and a 2022 second-round pick. It seems like a lot, but when you really think about it, Adam Gaudette doesn't seem to really be gelling well with this team. The Nashville Predators have shown interest in Adam Gaudette in the past. Jake Virtanen, they have wanted to move him out for a decent amount of time now. And they also have to move out that salary, which Jake Virtanen is making, so it gets evened out a little bit with Arvidsson coming in. You also have to trade a second-round pick because you're getting guys in Gaudette and Virtanen that are just fringe players at this point. So the asset that you really have to give up is that second-round pick. And with where Vancouver is in the standings right now, I don't think they want to give up a first. So you're giving up a lot of assets in Vancouver and Gaudette and Virtanen, as well as a second-round pick, but you're picking up a guy that's making under $5 million for the next 4 seasons that can play in your top 6, can add some goal support. It's been a little bit of a rocky season for Victor Arvidsson. It's been a real rocky season for all of the Nashville Predators, so maybe a change of scenery in Vancouver is exactly what a guy like Victor Arvidsson needs. Another team that we could see in on Victor Arvidsson, I think, is the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Devils are going to see a little bit of a shift, especially on the right side, which is where Victor Arvidsson will play a lot of. Nikita Gusev and Kyle Palmieri are on expiring contracts, and they're also above 30 years old. So do the New Jersey Devils want to consider signing one of or both of those guys to long-term contracts, which is probably what they want here on their last real contract before they probably inevitably retires. So Nikita Gusev and Kyle Palmieri are really key factors in this for the Devils. But if they decide to let both of those guys go, they're going to need depth on the right side. And a guy like Victor Arvidsson, who's been in the league for a little while, again, that really beautiful cap hit, makes him an attractive option. Not to mention the New Jersey Devils have a lot of young forwards that are cracking the lineup, and some of them that are maybe becoming the odd man out, like Nick Merkley, become available, or maybe a Michael McLeod. One of those guys, I think in this trade we're going to see center Nick Merkley and left shot defenseman Will Butcher for Victor Arvidsson. Will Butcher has really fallen off since his Hobey Baker, he had his Hobey Baker year with the NCAA when he was playing in college. Then he was a Rookie of the Year in his first NHL season. And since then, Will Butcher has not been the same. He's had some injury issues, and his value has definitely tanked a little bit. But at best, he is a good 3-4 defenseman on your team, and I think he could fit in well with Nashville. Again, they're going to give up guys like Mattias Ekholm and these other guys that I'm mentioning here in the next couple minutes, Dante Fabbro. A guy like Will Butcher could fit in nicely, as well as the young center depth in Nick Merkley. You're adding some more forward depth to your pipeline. He's probably going to get more minutes than he is right now in New Jersey. Mikael Granlund is the next guy we're going to take a look at for the Nashville Predators. He signed a one-year deal last summer for $3.75 million this season. And this is a guy, he goes back to Nashville. He went to the Minnesota Wild in the Kevin Fiala trade. And he decided to come back to Nashville. Actually, no. He got traded last year, and he came back to Nashville after, going and testing the market. He came back to Nashville this offseason. I think the price tag is pretty clean on Mikael Granlund. Now, there's going to be a lot of suitors, which makes this a little bit more interesting. But I think the main suitors that we've been hearing are the Philadelphia Flyers, the Colorado Avalanche, the Minnesota Wild, and surprisingly, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, I can make a mock trade for all of these teams, but I think it's going to be predominantly the same in each trade. You're going to see a 2022 second-round pick from all of these teams, maybe a first-round pick for a team like Colorado, and Philly. So this is where things differ. So for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Colorado Avalanche, you could see a 2021 first-round pick get it done for Mikael Granlund. For a team like Minnesota and Columbus, we're a little bit more on the fringe in terms of making the postseason here in 2021. Let's be honest, Columbus isn't making the postseason, but matters aside, you're going to have to give up a second-round pick, potentially two, if you don't want to give up another rookie or prospect, which Minnesota might take them out of the running for this one because they want to keep their prospects. Bill Guerin obviously sees a window here for this team. He's been with the Minnesota Wild in the past, was drafted by the Minnesota Wild, but I think we're going to see Bill Guerin maybe pull out of this one because he doesn't feel it's time to give up assets quite yet. And if the deal is right, maybe he makes that move. But I just think there's too many suitors in here. I think the Nashville Predators would rather get Philly or Colorado's first round pick than maybe a second round pick and a middle tier prospect from a team like Minnesota or Columbus. But those teams are in the market, so don't be surprised if we see a little bit of action for Mikael Granlund, especially that he is a pending UFA. Now, this is another name that's quite interesting because nobody's really talking about Eeli Tolvanen, the forward who was drafted at the end of the first round back in the 2019 NHL Draft. He came out of the season last year and had a lot of success early on, and things really took off from there in the wrong direction. He really fell off, and it seemed like he lost his magic touch. He played with the Norfolk Admirals this season and last season, and it just has not been great for Eeli Tolvanen. So maybe a change of scenery we could see here for the former first rounder that was supposed to be the diamond in the rough, and it didn't really work out quite yet for Eeli Tolvanen. He is a smaller forward as well. It might take him longer to develop, and I see one single trade that could make this work out in San Jose. And that is right shot defenseman Ryan Merkley. He has 2 years left on his entry-level contract. He is a defenseman. Like I said, the Nashville Predators may need some defensemen over the next couple years with the guys that they may be letting go of this offseason as well as at this year's trade deadline. A guy like Ryan Merkley, who just has been known to have maybe some off-ice issues, especially in San Jose, maybe a change of scenery is what he needs. So we see straight up Eeli Tolvanen for Ryan Merkley. I think that's a fair trade, and it's a change of scenery, which worst case scenario for both teams, they find a way to move out the other guy because it's not working with the situation it's at right now. So now we're going to move on really to just two defensemen that I think are going to draw the most interest at specifically this year's trade deadline. And those are Mattias Ekholm and Dante Fabbro. Now we're going to take a look at left shot defenseman Mattias Ekholm first. So just like Filip Forsberg, he has a contract this season and next season. He's making $3.75 million per season. This guy's going to be an attractive option to a plethora of teams around the NHL. And I think one of the predominant teams we're going to see are Boston and Toronto. Go figure. Boston would have to give up a guy like Jake DeBrusk and potentially a second or a first round pick. Probably a first round pick. So Boston would have to give up their first round pick and Jake DeBrusk for a guy like Mattias Ekholm. Again, that unbelievably, what is that? $7.5 million for this caliber of a defenseman in Mattias Ekholm for the next 2 years. Yeah, I think most teams would sign up for that, including the Boston Bruins. And the Bruins need help on the left shot, which we've absolutely seen. They got smoked by the Islanders and the Rangers last week. They've turned it around since then. But those are the kind of games where the defense was lacking for the Bruins, and it was very, very apparent that they were struggling. So we'll see what happens here. Mattias Ekholm is going to generate interest. I think another team like Toronto would be interesting as well, because they've got a young defenseman in Timothy Liljegren, who has not really worked out that well there. So maybe you throw in Timothy Liljegren and a 2021 first-round pick from Toronto, potentially even more. You may even have to give up a first-round pick in next year because, again, this guy, Mattias Ekholm, there's a lot of value. It might even take 2 first-round picks from Boston and Jake DeBrusk for Mattias Ekholm. Again, because of the salary per season and the magnitude of a defenseman. He could be a top-pairing defenseman. And if he wasn't in Nashville, he'd probably be a top-pairing defenseman around the league. So, Mattias Ekholm, again, like I said, Boston and Toronto seem like the perfect fits for this guy, but I think there are going to be other suitors around the league as well. I think Alex Goligoski is going to draw interest, so his value, we're going to see the value of Mattias Ekholm go up that much more because teams see that there isn't a huge market for big left shot defensemen on the cheap like Ekholm around. It may cost you 2 first-round picks and an A or B level prospect. Moving on to a young, again, former first-round pick, right shot defenseman Dante Fabbro on the final year of his entry-level deal. This is interesting. This is a guy that the trade chatter is going to be, what's the word? It's going to be more, you have to be more creative with Dante Fabbro trades because you're probably going to assume it's going to be some type of 1-for-1 trade. Because Dante Fabbro, what is his value? Is he worth 2 first-round picks? Is he worth a second-round pick? What is the value of Dante Fabbro? You're ideally looking for a forward somewhere that is around the same age, 20, 21 years old as Dante Fabbro, and projects to be a top 6 forward. And they also need right shot defensemen. So you look around the league and you try and think what teams would be in that conversation. Now, one team that I think could be interesting is a team that we talked about earlier with Nashville Predator trade rumors, and that is the New Jersey Devils. Now, they do have a guy like Damon Severson, and now you bring in Dante Fabbro. That's a pretty solid right shot for the New Jersey Devils. But what's the cost? Is it Pavel Zacha? Is that enough? I don't know if that's really enough. We've seen the turnaround from Pavel Zacha this season, but I don't know if that's enough. You're probably going to have to throw in another draft pick. But again, now we're talking about draft picks getting exchanged. So Pavel Zacha could work 1-for-1, but Dante Fabbro is a very solid offensive-minded defenseman, a great skater. So I don't know. A little bit of success here from Pavel Zacha. I don't know if that's fair market value 1-for-1. Another team that you could look at, if the New York Islanders can't keep Adam Pelech this offseason, maybe they look at potentially bringing in a guy like Dante Fabbro. What's the cost for the Islanders? Is it Oliver Wahlstrom straight up for Dante Fabbro? We could see value-wise that could potentially work 1-for-1, but is that something they'd be interested in? That's part of the issue too, because now the Islanders, again, they probably want to keep Adam Pelech around, but again, salary cap world, they're going to have to re-sign Dante Fabbro this offseason, and Oliver Wahlstrom has another year of his entry-level deal. Maybe the Islanders want to be careful with how they utilize a guy like Wahlstrom. Another team that I think could be in the conversation is potentially a team like Calgary or Montreal. And I think, again, you could go all across the Canadian teams. I think Vancouver is another interesting fit. Do we see Dante Fabbro for Brock Besser? Is that fair? I don't know. You probably have to throw in another draft pick if you're Nashville trying to pick up Brock Besser. But Vancouver obviously needs someone to replace Chris Tanev, because I don't know if you guys figured this out yet, but Vancouver kind of fucked up letting go of Markstrom and Tanev, or at least in an inability to replace those guys. Maybe it was okay that they let them go, but you need somebody to replace that, and they didn't get that. So maybe Dante Fabbro, a young right-shot defenseman, can play in the top four for your blue line. Maybe that's exactly what Vancouver needs. And like I said, looking at another team like the Montreal Canadiens, they have a plethora of young forward prospects. Do you maybe, give a call to Mark Bergevin? Hey, what about, what are you feeling about Ryan Poehling? What are you feeling about Victor Mete? Because Victor Mete hasn't played with the Montreal Canadiens. So, again, the blue line is pretty stacked in Montreal. So maybe they don't look at Dante Fabbro. Well, let's take a look at the West Coast. What about the Los Angeles Kings? What about the interest there for a guy like Dante Fabbro? Like I'm saying, there's a ton of teams that could potentially get a Dante Fabbro in their lineup. But I think LA seems like a good fit too, because Dante Fabbro, there are a ton of prospects in LA that kind of measure up pretty close to Dante Fabbro. Is it Arthur Kaliev? Is it maybe one of those guys like Nikolai Prokhorkin, Carl Grundstrom? This could be an interesting trade here for Dante Fabbro. Like I said, there's a lot of guys that could be out there. Would Arizona consider Dante Fabbro? Again, you could go around the league. There are a lot of teams that I think would be in on him. Moving on to our last position, and that is in between the pipes. And because Pekka Rinne is considered an untouchable, according to David Poile, who's the other guy? That's right, UC Saros. UC Saros is on the final year of a $1.5 million bridge contract deal, and UC Saros is not going to get his big payday. I hate to say it. He is considered a backup at this point, maybe a fringe starter. This is a guy in UC Saros that this was everything. This season was his year to prove that he could be the next starter, the heir to the throne to Pekka Rinne. And he just hasn't done that. And I've been talking about this for the past 1 or 2 years now. Really since I started doing power ranking. I feel like I say every video. When is UC Saros going to become this starter? When is he going to take the next step? When is that consistency button going to be on consistent for UC Saros? And it just has not happened. And I think the Nashville Predators would be smart. Maybe pick him up for some assets. Do you really want to keep him in the fold next season? Things just don't seem to be working. He is a restricted free agent, so whoever acquires him would have his rights in the offseason if they can't get a deal done. But I think UC Saros could give you maybe a second and a third round pick, maybe just a second round pick and a B or C level prospect. UC Saros' value definitely changes a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen this before where we do goalie swaps. This seems like a goalie swap potential, in this situation. I mean, what about the Florida Panthers? Maybe Chris Driedger for UC Saros? Maybe, just maybe. Just saying. So these are the kind of things that we have to take a look at. I think it's going to be a 1-for-1 in terms of goaltending for a guy like UC Saros. But the question is, where does he stack up? Is he a starter? Is he a backup? Or is he really that fringe goaltender right in the middle? And that gray area is very hard to determine with goaltenders. So we'll leave it at that. So guys, that is it for this video. This is a 25-minute video, guys. But we really took a deep dive in the Nashville Predators. I love doing videos like this, especially as we get closer to the NHL Trade Deadline. Then we're going to be doing a lot of mock trade videos here on the channel as we get closer to the deadline. I'll be taking a look at every team around the league, or most teams around the league, the more interesting ones if we're going to be honest. And I'm going to try and make some mock trades. If I was the general manager, armchair GM of the Nashville Predators, what would I do? So guys, let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of my mock trades here for the Nashville Predators? They are going to be one of the more interesting teams here going into the deadline. They're one of those teams that we're going to see a lot of changes. Even if it's not here at the deadline, this offseason, we could see Dante Fabbro get traded, a UC Saros get traded. I think there's going to be a lot of things happening in Nashville, and I'm pretty on board for it because they have struggled this season. The only team they seem to be able to beat is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I think it's time for some change. And they have a lot of assets and guys you might as well sell while they're still high or valuable, and that's what we're going to see potentially right here from the Nashville Predators. So, guys, that is it for this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Help us on the road to 1,000 subscribers, guys. I am planning a lot of things. I actually have a little surprise next to me, which you guys will not see until we get to 1,000 subscribers, but I do have it here. I'm looking at it right now. I'm waiting to show it to you guys. But we got to hit 1,000 subscribers. So tell all your friends. Let everybody know. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure you have the bell down below on as well so you get updates. I'm trying to get 2 videos per day over the next couple weeks as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. We're going to be doing a lot of trade talk over the next couple weeks. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and let's go Preds.